To think that you have been shot twice, once in your head and once in your arm, but yet you find the will to get up and run to look for help, but yet you're turned down two times before finally someone tells you, put your hands up and get on the ground in order for them to help you. That, it brings my heart to the, because clearly he needed help. But
Wow. Good morning and welcome to the National Newspaper Publicists Association's Let It Be Known. We're going to get to that story in a moment. Also, this morning, an Ohio grand jury is declined to bring charges against 8 Akron police officers, 7 of them white, in connection with last year's fatal shooting of Jayland Walker, a 25-year-old black motorist. And controversial Congressman George Santos, he's not only still in Congress, but he just announced he's running for re-election. And remember the pledges, all the pledges about diversity, equity, and inclusion that corporate America and others made when George Floyd was murdered? Well, a class action lawsuit, several, in fact, as many as 40 lawsuits say that these companies not only did not implement it, but they did everything to work against it. We're going to talk about that as well. But first, the situation in Kansas City. We bring in attorney Robert Tarver from the Tarver Law Firm in New Jersey. Good morning, Attorney Tarver. It's good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
Attorney Tarver, we start in Kansas City. Andrew Lester, a white 85-year-old homeowner who shot Ralph Yarl, a black teen, after the 16-year-old went to the wrong house, is now facing 2 felony charges, according to the Clay County Attorney Office. He's going to face charges of assault in the first degree and, of course, being illegally armed. I forget the terminology there, Attorney Tarver. I'm sure you could help me out with that, but this is a case. Gosh, the guy had the wrong address.
Yeah, look, what is this? This is attempted murder. This is assault with a deadly weapon. This is a bias and hate crime. There are so many things that he should have been charged with and has not been charged with yet. I do take fault, extreme fault, with this district attorney's office. I know their rationale was, hey, we arrest and then we deal with people. I'm sorry, we investigate and then we deal with them. But the fact of the matter is that doesn't apply across the board. When you have a serious crime wherein there is no justification, and here there is no justification, that arrest should have been made immediately. Instead, they brought him in, let him go, and now they're going to have to bring him back in order to be able to do what they're doing. And that's just unconscionable. It's only something that they do when it deals with white defendants and the so-called stand your ground type of rationale. And that's what this whole thing rests on at this particular point. But this whole scenario is one of the most outrageous things that I have seen in my more than 3 decades of legal practice as both a prosecutor and a defense attorney.
Wow.
Yeah, this is incredible.
And at some point, at any point, really, the federal government, the DOJ, can step in here too, right?
Sure, the DOJ could step in there. They generally will not step in until such time as the state finishes what they're doing, or at least gives some indication. I will tell you, just this week, I had a case in New Jersey where I met with the United States attorney for that district in the same scenario where the state refused to do something. Now, we don't know what the state's going to do here, and we don't know what a state jury would do if this got to a trial. But it's generally after the resolution of the state matters that a federal authority will step in. So what we'll see is we'll see the normal process play out. We'll see these charges presented probably to a grand jury. The question will be whether or not a grand jury will indict. And if they don't, then you'll probably see some form of federal action.
Now, one of the charges, assault in the first degree, and the other one, could you explain this charge, armed criminal action?
Yeah, that's one of the catch-all types of charges where it basically is, in most jurisdiction, it's kind of like an unlawful possession of a weapon for unlawful purposes. In other words, you use the weapon for an unlawful purpose, whatever that purpose was. And here, in my mind, it's an attempted murder. You're not stopping a break-in. You're not defending your home. You're not saving others, and you're not protecting yourself. So what are you doing? You're taking aggressive individual action against this young man, ostensibly, likely, and almost positively because he happens to be black at your door and you don't like his complexion at your door. You're going to do something about it.
So why armed criminal action? Why not just attempted murder?
It's interesting because every jurisdiction has their own way of charging. Every jurisdiction has their own set of facts here. And just because you see an initial charging of certain crimes doesn't mean that there will not be further crimes charged here. Again, there's going to be, I think, a further investigation of what happened here. Because the great thing is that you have a young man who survived.
Yes.
And he can tell the story of exactly what happened here. Most cases, you're dealing with a body. And so we're left to piece things back together, either through video or testimony of individuals. But this young man is going to be able to tell what happened. I mean, we know pretty much what happened to this kid. This kid made a mistake, went to the wrong door, was going to pick up his little brother, and bam, that's it. And Stacey, we get to the point where this young man, while laying on the ground, gets shot again. Circumstantial evidence. You can't tell what a person's thinking. Generally, they're not going to say what they're thinking, but their actions say what they're thinking. If you can shoot someone while they are helpless on the ground, it is your intent for that person to die. And that's what happened here. This was a clear intent to murder and kill for no reason.
Yeah, my old schoolmate Maurice Drink says, "Thank God he survived." Like you, Tarver. How much, if any, will this man's age play a factor? He's 85 years old.
It should play no factor in the charging process, and it should play no factor in any of the processes going forward. However, let's be realistic. There is at times either a competency factor that may emerge. In other words, they may say that this is a man who, at his advanced age, suffering from some form of dementia or other disorder, or there's a sympathy factor, which is to say, well, you know what? This is a guy who's at the end of his life. How should he spend the end of his life? Fact of the matter is, even if he is convicted of something minor, he should spend the rest of his days in jail. And it is repulsive that he was even released after this. This man is a danger.
Yeah, it's not a white collar crime. This is a violent, brutal, attempted murder.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is, when it comes to white men, they get the benefit of the doubt, where prosecutors say, well, it's not likely that he's going to do it again, and so we'll release that person. Why is it not likely? If you had the guts and the chutzpah and the craziness to do it in the first time, what makes you think you're not going to do it again?
Yeah.
So this is something that unfortunately we face as a regular instance and happenstance as Black people in America.
Well, and Power 96 writes in, "I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. What happened in Kansas City reeks of a cover-up. The police lied and the DA did not want to act until there was outside pressure." We know that the quote-unquote Black Attorney General, Ben Crump and S. Lee Merritt, took this case, is representing the family in this case. So there is a lot of attention drawn on this, and we want to say kudos to the Kansas City Defender. They are the newspaper that broke the story. Their online paper, they broke the story. A young Black-owned news organization here in Kansas City. Before anyone found out about it, they're the ones who broke this story. So David Youngblood believes that he will serve time. He will not serve time They will say, we don't want to feed him every day and his health care is expensive. That
No,
now some might laugh at that, right, Attorney Tarver? But
yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, I do believe that if he's convicted, look, there are certain offenses, even in Kansas City, even in Missouri, that carry with it mandatory jail time. And those are these types of offenses. But I do want to make one other point, Stacey, and that's simply this: these types of things that we're seeing with people coming up to property and just shooting people, they are all byproducts of the so-called stand your ground theory of law, which is to say that you have the right to protect your property. But the problem is that people are taking this way too far. They're basically disregarding whether or not there's a danger and just saying, well, you happen to be on my property and I'm going to shoot. Just in New York, just recently, 25-year-old pulled into the wrong driveway, drove up in the wrong driveway and got shot.
Yeah.
Didn't even get out of the car. And so, this is really just going way too far. But unfortunately, this is kind of what happens in politics and law. The pendulum swings until it swings too far, and then people tend to bring it back. And I don't know. I'm hoping we've gotten to the point of being too far.
You would hope. Look what's going on now in Ohio. There's a lot of angst and a lot of protests and demonstrations going on even as we speak, as a grand jury declined to bring charges against the Akron police officers, 7 of them who were white, in connection with last year's shooting of Jayland Walker, a 25-year-old black motorist. The grand jury officers were, quote, legally justified in their use of force, according to Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost. You remember that case, right?
Yeah, I do. 46 shots, I think it was 46 times that he was shot. And when you were, just remember this: when you get 46 entrance wounds, you're not counting the ones that missed, because every shot didn't land its mark. So you're talking generally about a good shot, 2/3, 1/3. So you're talking probably about 60 plus bullets that were fired at this young man as he was at a distance that wasn't even closing the gap with these officers. And that's what you have to think about. Did he have a weapon? Did they believe he had a weapon? I don't think so. But the fact of the matter is, he's not closing the gap, and he's moving away from you. So this is something that we are just confronting over and over and over again. And we had the discussion, off air about what happens generally when we run from police. Never a recommended procedure, never a recommended thing. But doggone it, with things like that, we and other instances we've seen in America, we have reason to run. We have reason to fear our lives from the very people who are supposed to protect us. So this is the problem. And once again,
here's a couple of observations, questions. First of all, David Youngblood says it was 94 shots with 46 entrance wounds. Now, Power 96. First, let me get to Maurice Drinks, and then because I think what Power 96 furthers this discussion, Attorney Tarver. Maurice Drinks says, here's an interesting question. What would happen to any of us if a random stranger rang our bell and we just came out blasting? I think we know the answer to that, right? But Power 96 says this, Attorney Tarver, and I really want your input on this. It is time to ban grand juries or make their proceedings open to the public.
Well, I have a mixed feeling about that. As a person who has been involved in grand juries and has steered them over the years, I tend to favor grand juries, because the other process is simply, as a prosecutor, to reject it on your own without people getting a chance to hear it. The problem is not necessarily the grand juries. The problem is the prosecutor who brings the case into the grand jury. Because if you present a case properly to grand jurors so that they understand all of the factors, there is very, very little room for them to deviate from where you've taken them. Now, rarely a grand jury can go rogue or whatever else like that. But I can tell you this, as a prosecutor, I never had anything indicted that I didn't want to indict, and always indicted everything that I wanted to indict, whether it had to do with homicide or simple theft, because I let them know what we needed, what it was about, and brought them along. And people have to understand the thing about grand juries is generally prosecutors have a period of time with a grand jury where they get to be socialized. In other words, the grand juries get to know that prosecutor. And because they get to know that prosecutor over a series of days or weeks or anything else like that, they tend to understand what a prosecutor is saying to them in terms of the seriousness of a crime and in terms of what the prosecutor believes should happen. And if they trust that prosecutor and that prosecutor steers it in that direction and explains to them how serious these things are, they tend to indict. Conversely, if a prosecutor does not push and does not show the same zeal for making sure that they understand what happened, they tend not to indict. Now, I'm not telling you that a prosecutor can move a grand jury this direction or move a grand jury that direction, only because I'm not telling you that.
So that there's that old legal saying, right? You could a prosecutor could indict have a ham sandwich indicted, right?
Absolutely.
But so in some ways, or maybe even in a lot of ways, it goes back to the question that Power 96 asks about what's the purpose of grand juries then? I know, like you said, some of them, it's rare, but some of them go the other way, right? But it's rare.
Some do. Some go the other way. But you know what? See, but here's the larger picture, and this is what we fail to understand. It is about having control of your electoral system. So where you have elected prosecutors, you've got to elect people who are going to do what they need to do. And if they're appointed prosecutors, you've got to elect the people who appoint those prosecutors. So if we're not going to get out and vote, and we're not going to exercise our right to have control over this, then we can't really complain about it, because we can control these prosecutors if we were to step up. If every eligible person of color were to step up and do their responsibility and job and vote these things, we'd have absolutely no problem with having prosecutors who know how to do what they need to do in moving these things forward.
Well, and the other side, my side is this: for everybody who looks like you and me, Tarver, do whatever you can not to get into that legal system. We have, regardless of resources, we have our odds are really stacked against us, right?
Yeah. Look, how many times have you heard the situation where a white male running from the police gets shot 47 times out of 96 shots? I can't recall it, because it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen because there is a respect for white life that's not present with black life. And once you see black people as less than human, then you can perform all types of dehumanizing acts. You can shoot them while they're on the ground. You could shoot them 96 times. You could put a broom into their anus, as they did in New York City. You can shoot like they did with Amadou Diallo. You can do any of these things that are so horrendous that you see being done to black individuals, but not done to white people.
Oh boy. Well, and here's another part of the problem, right? Yesterday, despite the many calls for him to resign, despite all the lies, despite just the insanity of it all, Representative George Santos announced that he is running for re-election. He says, "I am proudly announcing my bid for re-election for New York City's 3rd District. This is about," and he puts this in capital letters, "taking back our country and restoring greatness back to New York." This guy...
the best defense is a good offense, right? And this guy has just decided, I'm going all in. I'm going completely ham on this thing, and I'm going to make the best of it.
Whose country he's taking back? I want to know. George Santos, whose country are you taking back?
It has been very, very rough out there for white men and for people who identify as white. It's been very, very rough for them historically, and they just got to get this country back on the right track. Look, Santos is going down. He's going down on federal charges, in my estimation and in my view, no matter what happens here. But he's made a decision that he is going to do everything that he can to act like it's not happening. And it just reminds me, we were talking the other day about the character that was on Saturday Night Live with John Lovitz, the liar, where he would just say all kinds of outrageous things, you know, and this is the real life character. This is John Lovitz brought to life here. This is a young man that has absolutely no regard for the truth, no regard for process, no regard for how things have worked or should work in a democratic society. And the sad thing, Stacey, is that he is not alone. He is just a symptom and a byproduct of what has happened over the past few years, beginning with Donald Trump's election and pulling the scab off of a very nasty and dirty America.
You know, Santos, well, Maurice says Santos is another individual who should be in jail. David Youngblood says he's looking for a way out. It's better for a plea deal to keep running. And Power 96 says that George Santos is a gift for Democrats if they know how to use Santos's ignorance as a campaign slogan. I don't think many people are confident that Democrats know how to use anything to their advantage anymore. But beside the point,
worse on messaging than we've ever seen the Democrats.
Ever, right?
Horrible on messaging. and there's so much material out there. There's so much material to work on, but they want to wait until the absolute. And I understand there's a cost. There's a financial cost to being able to message. But the fact of the matter is, you will see Republicans message year-round, 24/7. You'll only see Democrats try to message as they get closer to elections, and that is the problem. You're getting message saturation from Republicans. You over and over again, we're hearing people talk about, you know, you didn't see what you really saw. You know, and that has an effect, and there's no opposition to it.
Wow.
No.
Well, you know, you remember Attorney Tarver. We all remember right after the murder of George Floyd, there was all of these pledges, large corporations making these pledges about diversity commitments. Well, following George Floyd's murder, many businesses, of course, they moved quickly to issue statements and adopt new procedures, they said, to combat racial, ethnic, and gender inequalities among their employee ranks. Well, according to several investor and employee lawsuits, these firms did not incorporate DEI pledges into board and staff. There are over 40 lawsuits, and the most egregious are against Wells Fargo and Delta Airlines. Speaking about,
so surprised at Wells Fargo.
Are you surprised?
Given the fact that they're coming out of 3 major national lawsuits dealing with redlining, dealing with loans, and all of those things, and failure to provide loans to Black people. You know, this is who Wells Fargo is. And the fact of the matter is, a lot of people wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt, thinking that they had changed, that they were ready to move forward. But look, this is symptomatic amongst corporate America. They've had the opportunity to make these types of pledges and these big pronunciations about what they're going to do and what's important to them and what's important to society. And they rarely, ever follow through. Now, there was a big push in the 70s and the beginning of the 80s in terms of hiring Black people and moving them into positions, but those pushes are gone.
Well, in addition, one of the lawsuits against Wells Fargo alleges that the company performed, quote, sham interviews to nominally fulfill a diversity enhancing policy.
Just like the NFL. Just like the NFL, right? You know, bring these coaches in. No, we're not going to hire you. But this is how those lawsuits go. The fact of the matter is, it's very difficult to hold companies responsible for pledges. However, it is much easier to hold them responsible for things that they allege are their policy. So if a company alleges something is their policy and they ostensibly put that into effect as a policy, then a violation of that policy can cause them legal jeopardy. So for example, if you say that you are committed to diversity in certain areas, that you and being more concrete, you know, sometimes talking about goals. You certainly can't say that you're going to have the specifics, but you can talk about goals and things of that nature. And if you do something that is completely antithetical or against those goals, then that can give rise to a suit. And that's what I think you're going to see here. I don't know how successful they're going to be, but the fact that they're being brought in the first place is very important, because it's letting people know that you can't get away anymore with just talking the talk. You're going to have to walk the walk. And if you don't, there's going to be consequences. And maybe you'll win, but maybe you'll lose. And if you lose, you're going to lose big financially.
Well, and in one instance, one suit, I should say, alleges that Wells Fargo did take a little action on DEI only after media coverage forced them to. It shows too the importance. If we are, as journalists, Attorney Tarver, doing our job, it can make a difference.
Yeah, and this also goes back to what you were talking about with Republican messaging. A lot of this has to do with the advent of the reverse woke situation with the right wing, and you'll see what's happening in Florida with DeSantis and Disney. The fact of the matter is that he has made that part of his marquee trademark to attack companies who deal in not just D&I, but deal with any type of outreach toward communities that are traditionally disadvantaged. And I think a lot of these companies now are they're kind of feeling that. They're feeling the idea that, hey, we have some sort of cover. Whereas during the George Floyd era, the cover was the other way, that the pressure was on them. DeSantis and his group have taken a lot of the pressure off, because they've said you don't have to be woke, so to speak. I hate to even use it. You don't have to be in that area. You can just basically do what you've always done. There's no reason for you to have any type of civic responsibility.
Well, some of the lawsuits against Delta take the form of shareholder derivative proceedings in which investors claim that a company's failure to achieve specific DEI goals, such as raising the proportion of women in management, caused the value of its stock to decline. I didn't know you could sue over that.
Those are the strongest suits, because these are people who, in every lawsuit, you have to have what is called standing. In other words, you have to be a person who can be personally affected by the outcome or the action that the company has taken. These are shareholders. So these are people who have money directly invested in this company. And what they're alleging is that your improper actions, your failure to meet your commitment that you said you would meet, has caused us direct financial harm. And as a result of causing direct financial harm, they have the right to be able to go after these companies to try to regress that financial harm. So those are the strongest suits that there are. I have no doubt that those are suits that are probably going to be settled, because the discovery process in these things is going to be the problem. This is what we've seen with Alvin Bragg and the other cases like that. This discovery thing, and discovery is basically the process whereby both sides in a lawsuit get information that proves or disproves their particular case. Can you imagine the information that's going to be compiled in a shareholder suit against Delta, where they start talking about the efforts that they made to actually fulfill those commitments? How many people did you interview? What was your program for doing that? How much money did you invest in that program? Ultimately, how many people did you hire? What was said to whom, by whom, when, and whatever? Those are very embarrassing things. And those are the reasons why these lawsuits tend to get settled.
It's it's just ridiculous. It also gives us insight, though, not that we needed it, right? That it all was a sham to begin with. It's the whole idea of, okay, we stand with Black lives, and we're going to do this or we're going to do that. It's all been ridiculous.
It has in a number of ways. Look, I mean, are there companies and have done some things? Yeah, I'm not going to paint them all with a broad brush, but in large part, you're starting to see that a lot of it was just talk, and a lot of it was just discussion. And the reason why they've done that is because they've been able to get away with that. No one has ever held them accountable for the things that they've said. So you make all types of pledges and pronouncements and everything else like that. But the fact of the matter is, I applaud these people who are involved in these suits, because unless you hold people accountable, they will continue the behavior over and over and over again. And whether it goes back to what we're talking about with policing, or whether it goes to corporate America and their actions, you must hold these people accountable. Even if you lose, the fact that you bring them to the mat and make them have to justify what they're doing is important enough in moving the ball forward.
What happens? Well, let me ask it this way: say they lose these suits, and they call Attorney Tarver to come in to talk to them about DE&I. What is Attorney Tarver going to talk to? What are you going to say to Delta Airlines? What are you going to say to Wells Fargo? More importantly, what would you say?
Well, look, I have done the diversity training, and what I try to tell all of the entities that I've dealt with in diversity training is this: there is a culture that you need to create in your company, which is a culture of inclusion. You have two choices. You have either the choice to reject the vision of a fully multicultural America, or to accept that. You can accept it or you can reject it. And the fact of the matter is, the numbers and demographics in America are changing. And you are also multinational in what you do. Mm-hmm. So either way, if you're not going to grow in a multicultural and diverse and inclusive way, you're going to die. And that's just the fact of the matter is. And it may not be in the 2 years or 3 or 5, but in 10 and 15, your labor force is going to change. That's just the way the demographics are working.
Wow, it's high time they understand that, right? But the other part of this, before I let you go, before we close out, the other part of this too is our responsibility, right? Black America's responsibility, Black businesses, their responsibility, of holding these folks accountable when that situation, and I mentioned this before, when the murder of George Floyd happened, and these corporations and companies, we had Mark Cuban come on our program and say, look, we've got to do something systemically, right? I agree 100%. Now, Mark Cuban did back up, at least with the Black press.
Yeah.
One of our newspapers, the Dallas Weekly, he backed that up by getting into a partnership with them on a certain project, right? And the project wasn't for 2 months or 6 months or whatever. It's a from what I understand, it's a pretty long-term project. Mm. Did we, from where you sit and from what you know, did we, Black companies and Black businesses, heck, even the Black press, did we let white corporate America off the hook?
Well, look, here's the difficulty. We are being confronted with so many different situations and so many different areas, whether it is in the political realm, whether it's in the legal realm, and all these. It is difficult to stay on top of each and every one of these issues when you're being battered down every day. And right. The fact of the matter is, who's going to hold these people accountable? Who's going to do that when you really think about it? We have people who can shine a light, which is the Black press and others. But ultimately, we don't really have strong mechanisms anymore for holding people accountable. Our institutions and our organizations are weakened. The NAACP, it does some really good legal work, but it's weakened. Mm-hmm. The Urban League is weakened. All of these institutions that we have relied on in the past, some of them never really were strong, are weakened. And they're weakened because we don't work together. We don't have a symbiotic relationship between all. I have argued this many, many years, that the National Bar Association, which is the Black Bar, needs to be talking and working with the NAACP, with the Urban League, with National Association of Black Journalists, with the Black press. All of us should be working together. And how do you do that? You have to put together a consortium that sits down and says, look, this is your role, this is your role, this right. is your role, this is your role. Until we do that, we're always going to be scrambling and following the next problem, because that's the way that things work in America. They keep us distracted.
Yeah. Distractions. This is one of the 2 billion reasons why we like to have you on, because you really break it down for us like nobody else.
Distraction.
No, you break it down so well, legally and otherwise. So we appreciate you, Attorney Robert Tarver, the Tarver Law Firm. Look him up. Not that he is out here seeking any more cases, but I'm sure he'll help you out if necessary. Thanks so much, Attorney Tarver. And thank you all for watching Let It Be Known. We'll see you again tomorrow.